The voicemail came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and I almost didn't listen to it. My husband was supposed to be in Denver for a structural engineering conference. He'd shown me the itinerary 2 weeks before. Hotel confirmation, conference schedule, even the name of a colleague he was carpooling with from the airport. I had no reason to question any of it. We'd been married 9 years. We had a 12-year-old daughter named Lily and a 10-year-old son named Owen. I was 33 years old, and I was standing in my kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, reheating leftover pasta, and I almost let that voicemail go to the archive without ever playing it. I pressed play because I thought it might be my mother. It wasn't my mother. It was a woman named Carol, a friend of my friend Becca, and her voice was careful in the way people's voices get when they're about to say something they've rehearsed. She said she was sorry to bother me. She said she didn't know if she should call. She said she'd seen my husband that afternoon at a restaurant on the east side of Columbus. Not Denver, Columbus. She said he was with a woman. She said they were holding hands across the table. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after the voicemail ended. The pasta was still heating. The microwave beeped. I didn't move. The thing about hearing something like that is your brain does the strange triage. It immediately starts looking for exits. Conference got moved. He flew back early. He didn't tell me because... Because what? Because he wanted to surprise me? Because he was exhausted and forgot? The exits were all there, lined up, and I walked toward each one and found it bricked over before I even got close. He had texted me at 8 that morning from what he said was his hotel room. He'd sent a photo of the view. Mile High City, he'd written. Missing you guys. The Rocky Mountains were right there in the background of the photo. I pulled up the photo again. I zoomed in. I looked at the mountains for a long time. Then I called Becca. She answered on the second ring, and I could tell she already knew why I was calling because she didn't say hello. She just said, "I'm so sorry, Hazel." I asked her if Carol was reliable. She said yes. I asked her if Carol could have been mistaken. She paused for too long before she said she didn't think so. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed we'd shared for 9 years, and I stared at the ceiling and I did math I didn't want to do. All the conferences, all the late nights at the office, the weekend in April when he'd gone to visit his brother in Pittsburgh, or said he had. The way he'd started being slightly, almost imperceptibly more distant over the past year. Not dramatically, not in a way I could have pointed to and said, there, just a degree of warmth removed, like a dial turned a single notch. I had noticed. I had told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't imagining it. By morning, I had made 2 decisions. The first was that I would not say a word to my husband. Not yet. The second was that I needed to know the truth before I did anything else. The whole truth, not just a voicemail from a friend of a friend. I needed documentation. I needed something I could hold in my hands. I found the pie through a Google search, then vetted 3 of them before I called the one with the most detailed website and the most measured tone on the phone. His name was Frank. He did not seem surprised by anything I told him. He gave me a flat weekly rate and a list of what he would and wouldn't do, and I said, fine, start Monday. I also called my sister. My sister Tess is 4 years older than me, and she is the kind of person who does not panic. She is a paralegal in Cleveland, and she has seen enough to be unshockable. And when I told her what was happening, she went quiet for exactly 3 seconds, and then she said, "Okay, here's what you need to do." She told me to find a good family law attorney before I had any more information, not after. She said the attorney would help me understand what documentation mattered and how to protect myself financially while I was still gathering evidence. She gave me the name of a woman her firm had worked with, a family law attorney in Columbus named Catherine Webb. She said Catherine was methodical and thorough and did not get emotional in depositions, which was exactly what I needed. I called Catherine Webb the next morning. She took me at 4 o'clock. Sitting in her office, I felt the way you feel in an emergency room. This suspended quality to everything, like the ordinary rules of time have been temporarily suspended. Catherine listened without interrupting. She asked precise questions. At the end, she laid out what she called the landscape, what Ohio law said about marital assets, what documentation would be useful, what my rights were with regard to the house and our joint accounts, and what she strongly recommended I do not do. Do not move money, she said. Do not confront him. Do not tell your children anything yet. Let me work and let your pie work and come back to me when you have more. I did what she said. I went home. I made dinner. I helped Owen with his math homework, and I sat with Lily while she practiced her violin. And when my husband called from Denver that evening, I answered the phone and I said, "How was your day?" And he said long, "You know how these things are?" And I said, "I know. I miss you. Get some sleep." I hung up and sat with the phone in my lap for a long time. The results started coming in from Frank on day 4. My husband was not in Denver. He had not been in Denver on any of the 3 occasions in the past 8 months when he claimed he was there for work. The conference existed. He had registered for it. He had not attended a single session. Instead, he had spent those days at a rental house in the suburbs of Columbus. A house that Frank traced back to a woman who lived there full-time. Her name wasn't relevant to me yet. What was relevant was that he had been there, repeatedly, consistently. Going back further than 8 months, Frank thought, based on some of what he found. On day 7, Frank told me something that made the floor tilt. He said the woman was pregnant, visibly, unmistakably in her 3rd trimester pregnant. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Kroger, and I processed that piece of information for approximately 25 minutes. A woman in a minivan pulled in next to me, unbuckled 2 small kids from their car seats, and herded them toward the entrance, and I watched the whole thing without seeing any of it. My husband was going to have a child with someone else, while he was married to me, while he was the father of Lily and Owen, while I was making dinner and helping with homework and sitting next to him in church at Christmas. I called Catherine Webb from the parking lot. She wasn't surprised either. I was starting to understand that nothing surprised her. She said this changed some of the calculus around timing, and she asked me if I was ready to start moving toward the next phase. I asked her what the next phase looked like. She said, comprehensive. Here is what I didn't know until Catherine explained it to me in Ohio: financial misconduct during a marriage, including using marital funds to support an extramarital relationship, is something the court can consider when dividing assets. It's called dissipation of marital assets. Frank spent the next 2 weeks documenting every transaction my husband had made in the past 2 years that could be traced to the other woman. The rental house. Gifts. A weekend in Charleston. A piece of furniture. A car repair. It added up to more than $40,000. $40,000 of our money. I had been watching our savings and thinking we were just having an expensive couple of years. Lily's braces. Owen's travel baseball. The new roof. Normal life expenses. Meanwhile, my husband had been quietly, systematically redirecting money that belonged to both of us, to us as a family, to a parallel life he had constructed 18 minutes from our house. Catherine filed the divorce petition the Thursday before my husband was due to return from Denver. He came home on a Friday evening and found the papers on the kitchen counter. I had taken Lily and Owen to my sister Tessa's house in Cleveland for the weekend. I had told the kids that we needed a little trip, just us, just for fun, and Lily had looked at me for a long moment with those dark eyes she has and said, "Mom, is everything okay?" I said it would be. She kept looking at me. She's 12 and she is not easily fooled, and she put her arms around me in the kitchen and she said, "Whatever it is, I'm on your side." I didn't cry until she let go. Owen asked if Tess would make her French toast. I said I'd ask. He said, great, great, that was great. Problem solved. My husband called 17 times that weekend. I didn't answer once. On Monday, Tess drove me back to Columbus, and I sat across from my husband in our living room, and I told him that I had retained an attorney, that I had documentation of the financial misconduct, and that I would not be discussing reconciliation. I was very calm. I had practiced being calm. I told myself on the drive down from Cleveland that calm was the most powerful thing I could be in that room. And I held on to that the way you hold a railing. He cried. He said he was sorry. He said he hadn't meant for it to go this far. He said it had been a mistake and he loved me, and could we please talk about this before making any decisions that couldn't be undone? I said, the decisions that can't be undone were made before today. This is just paperwork. He flinched. I hadn't planned to say that. It came out of somewhere true. What followed were 4 months of legal proceedings that I will not describe in detail because they were exhausting and procedural, and Catherine handled most of it with a precision that I could only watch and be grateful for. What I will tell you is what mattered. The $40,000 in dissipated marital assets was documented and presented. The court agreed it was relevant to the property settlement. The marital home, our house, the one we'd bought together 6 years earlier, the one with the vegetable garden I planted in the backyard, and the pencil marks on the doorframe measuring Lily and Owen's heights every year, was to be sold. And I received a substantially larger share of the equity because of the financial misconduct. My husband's attorney tried to argue that his income should factor into a more balanced split of ongoing expenses. Catherine had anticipated this. She had documentation showing that his income projections for the past 3 years had been misrepresented to me on at least 2 occasions when we made major financial decisions together. The judge was not impressed with him. The custody arrangement gave me primary residential custody. My husband had visitation. Lily, when the court-appointed advisor spoke with her, said clearly and without hesitation that she wanted to live with me. Owen said the same, then asked if he could still do travel baseball. He could. I made sure of it. The hardest part was not the legal process. The hardest part was my in-laws. My mother-in-law called me 3 weeks into the proceedings and said she hoped I would consider being flexible for the sake of the children, and that these things were complicated, and that her son was a good man who had made a mistake. She said it in the careful voice of someone who has rehearsed, and I thought, you knew. I don't know exactly when I became certain of that, but I did. The way she'd been slightly cooler to me over the past year, the way her husband had avoided my eyes at Easter, the way his younger sister at Lily's birthday dinner in March had gone very quiet when my husband's name came up. They had known. Maybe not everything, maybe not the full scope, but they had known something. And they had said nothing, and they had let me sit across from their son at dinner tables and holidays and school events for God knows how long without a word. I told my mother-in-law that I appreciated her call and that I had nothing further to discuss with her at this time. I have not spoken to any of them since. Lily understood more than I'd expected. She's 12. She processes things in layers, and I'd watch her sometimes going quiet at dinner or staring out the car window, and I knew she was working through something. One evening, about 2 months after we moved into the apartment, a good apartment, 3 bedrooms, close to her school, she came and sat on the counter while I was cooking, and she said, "Dad knew what he was doing, right? He wasn't confused or sick or something. He just decided to do it." I put down what I was holding. I turned and looked at her. "Yes," I said, "he knew what he was doing." She nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think that's worse, but also better, because there's nothing to fix. It's just what it is." I stood there looking at my 12-year-old, and I thought about the kind of person she was becoming, and I thought it is not nothing what she has been through. The damage her father's choices did to her is real, and it will take time, and it deserves to be named clearly for what it is. But I also thought, she is not broken. She knows how to look at a hard thing and call it by its name. Owen deals with things differently. He goes quieter for a few days and then surfaces and wants to play catch in the parking lot or watch a movie and eat too much popcorn, and that is his way of returning to himself, and I let him do it without pushing. He asked me once early on if it was his fault, and I sat down on the floor with him right there in the hallway and I said no, absolutely not. This is an adult problem that has nothing to do with anything you did or didn't do. And he looked at me carefully the way he does, and then he said okay, and I believed that he meant it. They both still see their father. That is his right, and their right. I don't speak about him to them in any terms that would make that harder than it already is. What he does with those visits, how he explains himself to them over time, how he builds or fails to build a relationship with them as they get older, that is his work to do. I can't do it for him, and I won't pretend to. My attorney fees were substantial. I will not pretend otherwise. There were months where I looked at my bank account and felt the particular cold of understanding that every safety margin I'd counted on had narrowed, but I had my job. I'm a budget analyst for a mid-size healthcare company, and it turned out that 9 years of managing a household's finances while working full-time had made me very, very good at knowing where every dollar went and exactly how far I could stretch what I had. I worked with what I had. I made it work. The apartment has a small patio where I've started growing tomatoes in containers. It's nothing like the garden, but last July, Owen came out while I was watering them and he said, without preamble, "Those are actually looking pretty good," and there was something in the way he said it that felt like a door opening somewhere. There is a version of this story that I could tell where the focus is on what was taken from me. The 9 years, the money, the picture of the future I'd been building in my head, with the house and the garden and the pencil marks on the doorframe. The ordinary trust that I had extended to someone who didn't deserve it. I could tell it that way. Every word would be true. But here is also what is true. I am 33 years old, and I know now, with a clarity I did not have before, exactly who my daughter is. I know what she is made of. I know my son's particular quiet courage, the way he metabolizes hard things slowly and then comes back ready. I know that my sister will answer the phone on the second ring. I know what I am capable of when I have to be. I didn't come through this because I was strong enough to begin with. I came through it because I had no choice, and then somewhere in the middle of having no choice, I found out I was stronger than I knew. The tomatoes are still doing well. Lily wants to try peppers next spring. Owen has requested we grow nothing, ever, that he will be expected to eat. We're going to be okay. We already are. I keep coming back to the voicemail. 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and I almost didn't press play. That's the part that stays with me. Not the betrayal itself, but how close I came to choosing not to know. How easy it would have been to let it sit in the archive, to roll over and go to sleep, to keep moving through a life that was quietly hollow at the center. A lot of people make that choice. I understand why. Knowing is harder than not knowing, at least in the short term. Knowing means you have to do something about it. What I learned about myself in the months that followed is that I was capable of a lot more clear-headedness than I'd given myself credit for. Not because I wasn't devastated, I was. There were nights where I lay in that apartment and felt the specific grief of a future that no longer existed. The pencil marks on the doorframe, the garden I'd planted, the version of our life I'd been tending like something real. That grief was real. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't, but grief and clear thinking aren't opposites. You can feel something fully and still be functional, still be methodical, still make the phone calls that need to be made and ask the right questions and refuse to be talked out of what you know is true. My husband had made his choices over a long period of time, consistently and deliberately. $40,000 doesn't disappear by accident. A rental house 18 minutes from your home doesn't appear by accident. What he built required planning, and the planning required a decision, repeated over and over, to choose deception over integrity. That's not a mistake. A mistake is a wrong turn. What he did was a direction he traveled in, knowingly, for years. And that's a kind of accountability that doesn't require my anger to be real. It just is. The consequences that followed, the legal proceedings, the property settlement, the custody arrangement, the relationship with his children that he now has to rebuild from a position of having abandoned them first, those weren't punishments I designed. They were the natural result of the choices he made. You can't redirect $40,000 of family money into a parallel life and then expect the family to remain intact. That's not how it works. Actions have weight. They land somewhere. What I'm most proud of, and it took me a while to be able to say that word without flinching, is that I didn't collapse. Not because I'm exceptionally strong, but because I refused to make decisions from panic. I called Catherine before I had all the information. I let Frank do his work before I said a word. I held on to the knowledge that clarity, used carefully, is more powerful than any emotional confrontation could ever be. Intelligence isn't just what you know. It's knowing when to act, when to wait, and what information actually matters. Lily understood more than I expected. Owen processed it in his own quiet way and came back ready. Tess answered on the second ring. The people who loved me showed up. That didn't happen by chance either. It happened because I had spent years being someone worth showing up for, and that investment came back when I needed it most. That's the thing about living with integrity. It doesn't protect you from being hurt. It doesn't guarantee that the people closest to you will do the same. But it means that when everything falls apart, you still have yourself. You still have the foundation. And it turns out that's enough to build from. The tomatoes are doing well. Lily wants to try peppers in the spring. We're already okay.